Hello everyone, I'm Jagdish Chopre. Welcome you all in class 7 of React.js training for beginners. Now in last class we covered children props. Now in this class 7 we will cover arrow functions. So let's get started. Now here for exploring all about arrow functions, I would like to create a new component because here our Udemy application is going good. So for that here in the components folder I will create a new folder and let's call this component as demo. Inside that, I will create a component file. Let's call this demo.jsx. And in that, I will create a component function demo. From that, as of now, I will just return one div and one h1. Let's call this as demo. With that, let's export this function. Let's save this and we are ready with the demo component. Now, where to display this component? I definitely do not want to display this in our app.jsx because there our Udemy demo application is going well. So what I will do, I will set this demo component as our starting component temporarily. And we know that from main.jsx we set our starting component, which is by default set to app component. So here I will comment this app component by using control/, and here let's try to import the demo component. And let's cross check the path in the auto import suggestions. It is coming from the components folder, demo folder, and then demo.jsx. Let's hit tab, then our demo component automatically got imported. Here let's self close this component and hit save, and we got our demo component now as the startup component. Now here in this demo component also I would like to add my header, my app bar, which we previously added in the app.jsx file, this header, and in that I would like to add the title of this class, which is arrow functions. For that, here we can import that header function because we created it, and this is the header component from this path. Let's hit tab and it will automatically import it. And then let's self close this. Once we save this, our header component got added and is getting displayed here on the page, but right now it is showing the Udemy as a title, which is of course because if we check our header component, here we added this Udemy as a hard coded value. But now I want to make this header component reusable so that I can use it for multiple purposes. Now for that, we can take help of the props. Here we can pass property in which we will pass the title which we want to render here, or we can also use children props which we already covered in last class. Now here we can pass the title as a content like arrow functions, and the same we can capture here in this header component as a children props. So here instead of printing this hard coded Udemy value, we can print props.children. Now if we save everything, we will see arrow functions getting printed here. Now before we forget, let's make the same change here in this header component also, which we are using in the app.jsx. So here I will pass Udemy as a value. So when we will switch back to the app component, it will have Udemy there in the app bar. Save this and close the app.jsx file. Let's close the header.jsx file too, and let's proceed with our arrow function syntax. Now here in this h1, instead of this demo, let's print a message for greeting the user like hello guest. Save this and we got the message. Now, instead of printing this as a hard coded value, I would like to create a function. So let's create a function here. Let's call this greet user. From here, let's return the same value. So let's cut this value from here and paste it here. And now let's call this function here in this h1 inside the expressions. If we save this, we will going to see the same message. But if we change any value here, and if we save this, then that value will get reflected here. Now up to this point, everything we already know or already covered in the previous classes. There is nothing new as of now. But now let's talk about arrow function syntax. Now arrow function is not a new concept, but rather a new syntax for defining the JavaScript functions, which got introduced as a part of ES6, ECMAScript 6 JavaScript feature pack. Now here, as of now, I will comment this function, and let's try to define this function by using arrow function syntax. Now here, as soon as I commented this function call start throwing an error that greet user is not defined. So let's define the same function by using arrow function syntax. So here, for defining the same function by using arrow function syntax, we first of all need to open the parenthesis braces. And after that, there will be a body. That means this particular syntax will be just the same. But here, while denoting the function body, we need to use arrow function syntax. So because of this arrow like looking symbol, this syntax is called as the arrow function syntax. Now from this, we can just pass the same value. And now this is the body of the function. Now in order to call this function from our JSX, we need to capture the reference of this function in a variable. And let's define that variable by using constant keyword, and let's name that variable greet user. And in that, we will assign this function. Now the reference of this function got assigned to this variable. And going forward, whenever we want to call the function, we can use this variable and can treat it as a function call. And here, if we change the value, let's use any another value, and if we save this, you will see the same value is getting returned here. Now arrow function syntax might be looking intimidating at first, but its versatile syntax adds a convenience once we get used to it. Now there are a couple of rules and regulations while playing with arrow function syntax. Let's understand those, and that is very important because in React we use arrow function syntax extensively, and if you are not very much familiar with the syntax and variations, it gets difficult to understand the code syntax. Now here, whenever we are returning a single statement, at that time we can get rid of the curly braces. So here I will just delete these curly braces, and when we are not using the curly braces, when there is only one value available to return, at that time we can, along with the curly braces, can omit the return keyword. Now here, this is a valid arrow function syntax. The meaning is this much is the definition of this function. From that, we are not passing any parameter. This arrow indicates the body of this function is this much. That means only the single statement, that is a string. When we have only a single statement, that means that value automatically gets returned as a part of this function call. That means whenever we are calling this function, this value will get printed here. If we are saving, we will not going to see any change, neither the error. Now suppose I want to pass the username while calling this function. Here I will pass the username, and the same I would like to collect here as a parameter. Now the same I want to print here in this greet message. For that I can take help of template literal string. For that, instead of this single quote, I will use backticks. And here I will use the dollar and curly braces syntax, and inside that I will print the variable value, which is username. Now if we save, then we will going to see Jagdish is getting printed here. Now in the arrow function syntax, when we only have a single parameter, at that time we can omit the parenthesis for capturing the parameter. And here this is the complete valid arrow function syntax. Once we save this, we will not going to see any errors, and the code is working fine. And here at this point, many developers get confused by seeing this syntax. Here the meaning is this much is the definition of this function, whereas there is only one parameter. That is why the parentheses are omitted, and this arrow is indicating the body of this function, where as there is only one statement or return value, that means the curly parenthesis for the body and the return statement got omitted. And the reference of this complete function body is getting captured here in this greet user constant variable, and the same we are using for calling this function wherever required. But suppose if we do not have any parameter, that time we cannot omit the parenthesis. We must need to provide the parenthesis if there are no parameter to pass to this function. But if there is a single parameter, at that time it is safe to omit or to keep the parenthesis. Let's say suppose I want to pass the greet message also as a part of this function call. So here I'm passing the greet message, and the same I want to collect here. So here if I'm using greet message, now here it will start throwing the error, because omitting the parenthesis is only allowed when we have only a single parameter. If we have zero parameter or more than one parameter, at that time we must need to enclose those in opening and closing parenthesis. This is the syntax we need to remember. Now here, instead of this hard-coded greeting message, I will replace this with the greet message, which we are passing as a part of this function call. Now once we save this, we are going to see Hey Jagdish on the screen. Now let's recap one final time. So here I do have a single statement. That is why I am not enclosing this in a curly braces and omitting the return keyword. But when to add the curly braces? When we have multiple lines, multiple statements as a part of this function body, at that time we must need to enclose the function body in the curly braces. For example, here I have multiple lines as a part of this function body. So at that time I will include the curly braces. So here I do have multiple lines, and one line is this return statement. Now here we are enclosing the whole body in the curly braces. Now here if we save this, we will not going to see anything, because nothing will going to get passed from this function body. Because when we have multiple statements and the function body is enclosed in a curly braces, at that time we must need to specify which line needs to pass from this function, if any. Now here I want to pass this value from this function. That time I must need to specify the return keyword, and then only that value will get passed. And you have to remember, if there is only one return statement, that time we are not using any function body nor the curly braces, but we also should not use the return keyword. If in this case I am specifying the return keyword, it is giving an error. So here, in these cases, we have to just use this single statement as a part of this function body. And if we save this, no error and everything is working fine. Now as the last point, we can use the same arrow function syntax for defining the component function also, because the component functions are nothing but the JavaScript functions. Now here, let me rewrite this demo component function by using arrow function syntax. For that, I will create a variable by using const, and let's call this as a demo, and to that I will assign the complete function body. But here we must need to specify the arrow function for defining the function body. And now we can use this function reference for calling and using this function. Once we save this, there are no issues and our demo function is completely working fine. That's all for this class. In next class, we will see event handling. Thank you.